I think he did a wonderful job, Gary O'Neill, last season. When you think he inherited a team that just lost 9-0 at Liverpool, to keep them in the Premier League and to keep them up pretty comfortably, really. They didn't end the season well. They lost, I think, the last 4 matches, but safety was already assured by then. For Bournemouth to decide to go in a different direction, I think is a bold call from the football club. I feel really sorry for Gary O'Neill because I don't think he could have done too much more, but it's going to be fascinating to see how this experiment works out.
Crook, do you think potentially it was the end to the season? I know, as you said there, they were safe, and I know what happens when you are safe. It maybe takes the foot off the gas a little bit, but the fact that they lost quite convincingly in their last 4 games, we're actually saying that they had a couple of 1-0s in there. Do you think the end of the last season has anything to do with their decision this season?
I think it probably had a bearing. And if you look at Gary O'Neill and his tenure, he was quite a streaky manager when he first came in to replace Scott Parker on an interim basis. They went on a really good run. They beat Everton back-to-back in the League Cup and the Premier League before the World Cup. And that really convinced Bill Foley, the American owner, to give Gary O'Neill the job. Their form after the World Cup wasn't particularly good. Then they got it together again, and then it did tail off. But you'll know, Benty, when you're in a dressing room where the aim is to survive in the Premier League, once that's been achieved, it's quite difficult, isn't it, to find the motivation to finish the season well. But I think it will have played a part. And actually, if you listen to Bill Foley, his ice hockey team have just won the Stanley Cup, a really prestigious tournament to win. And he was asked about Bournemouth in the press conference after that. And he was saying, well, we've got ambitions, we're not getting too carried away. But he was talking eventually about maybe finishing in the top 10 in the Premier League. And I think Bill Foley has just taken the decision that now is the time to say, thank you very much, Gary O'Neill. You did a wonderful job last season. But if we're really going to kick on, we need a new coach. And I remember speaking to Bill Foley when he first came in, and he said, I'm not here just to watch the paint dry. So he's got his ambitions, and he's really hung his hat on this guy, Areola, who by all accounts is one of the most exciting coaches in Spain. If it works out, I think Bill Foley is going to be cast in the role of some kind of mastermind down the line. And it does, for me, feel very similar to when Southampton, also on the South Coast, parted company with Nigel Atkins. You may remember that wasn't a very popular decision. They brought in this guy, unknown, Pochettino. Look how that turned out.
A couple of questions again for me, Cricket. One, the fact that they've come to this decision so quickly, does that tell you that they've been talking to him for a while, this new manager? And secondly, is it a bit of a risk? Because you had someone there who did keep you in the league, was hungry to become manager, got the job, did the job that he was asked to do, which was keep Bournemouth up, and to move on from him so quickly. Is that a little bit dangerous?
It's definitely a risk. And I know the players at Bournemouth really invested in what Gary O'Neill did last season. You speak to any Bournemouth player and they'll say he was brilliant at working out exactly what the opposition were going to do and how to tailor their game plan to really negate that. And in answer to your first question, have they been speaking to him for a while? I think they have. I think he was on their radar when Gary O'Neill was actually appointed on a permanent basis after Scott Parker was replaced. O'Neill, as I've mentioned already, did well as interim, but they did cast their net quite wide at that stage. There was talk of Marcelo Bielsa. That reached quite an advanced stage. In the end, it was Bill Foley himself who decided to stick with Gary O'Neill. But Areola, you may remember, was linked with Leeds at that time. But because he's from the Basque Country, because he's very loyal to Vallecano, he didn't want to come to the Premier League. So he wasn't really attainable. Now he is. He's reached the end of his contract. So Bournemouth, I think, have decided this is a moment in time. We stick with Gary O'Neill, or in their mind, we try and be a little bit more ambitious. We change the direction of travel. We change the playing style. And this is the guy. This is the guy to come in and do that. And actually, if you look at that region of Spain, it's a really small region. I saw a tweet earlier from a Spanish football journalist. So the area where he's from in the Basque Country is as small as Wiltshire. Unai Emery, Mikel Arteta, Julian Lopetegui, and Yabi Alonso all hail from the same region. So I wonder if that's part of the attraction as well.
When you say as small as Wiltshire, do you mean Jack Wiltshire? Because that's tiny.
It's not much bigger. I think they've got. I think the inhabitants there is about 713,000. But the fact they've managed to garnish so many good football managers from one particular part of Spain is incredible.
Quickie, let me ask you, Quickie. Sorry to cut across. Let me ask you. I admire any club that has ambition, right? And they've obviously got rid of Gary O'Neill and brought in this new manager because they feel as a club that they can do better. But there's a thin line. What is better? Because With the group of players that he had, and as you said, he took over the club when, I wouldn't say it was on his knees, but it wasn't going places. It certainly wasn't look like he was going to have Premier League football the following season. They finished 15th. We just played a package there of lots of talkSPORT names talking about what a great job he's done, Gary O'Neill, and should he be manager of the season. He, of course, wasn't, but the fact he was in the conversation must mean something. You've got clubs like United, City, Newcastle, Aston Villa, Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, all trying to get top 4, and there's 7 or 8 I've just named. What are they aiming for? Is top 10 the most they can realistically go for? Is it survival? They've brought in a new manager. What's the aim now, do you think?
I think it's about more than just league places, Andy, to be honest. I think it's about the style of play. There are some Bournemouth fans who would maybe suggest that Gary O'Neill was quite attritional at times last season. They looked to hit teams on the counter-attack. I think they want a coach to come in who's maybe going to play with a little bit more energy. They believe that the squad that they have at the moment and the players they're looking to bring in suit the new man's playing style. But I'm not going to sit here and say that Gary O'Neill did a bad job or that I'm necessarily in favour of removing Gary O'Neill, because I'd be a hypocrite, because I was one of those people who was touting Gary O'Neill for manager of the season. What I do find interesting is that most Bournemouth supporters seem to be in favour of this decision. In fact, I got a lot of stick last season on social media for defending Gary O'Neill in their eyes, because they weren't happy with the playing style. They think he got lucky in a few games, and that maybe finishing 15th was an overachievement. I guess only time will tell. But speaking of people in Spain, they believe this is a really exciting appointment for Bournemouth.
I get it for Gary O'Neill and the Bournemouth supporters, but I think at times you've got to play a particular brand of football where you'll stay up, you'll get results, and I think Gary O'Neill did that. But also, with the new manager in charge, how much money is he going to get to spend? Because that squad there, if they don't really reinvest in that squad, they're going to have the same problems they had last season.
I think there'll be a few quid, Benty, to be honest. I think, as I say, having met Bill Foley on a couple of occasions, he's not hanging around. He's not a youngster, to be honest. He's come into the football world quite late in his life, and he wants to be successful. He's one of a number of American owners. He won't admit it, but look at what the Aston Villa's American owners are doing. He'll look at what Todd Bowley's done at Chelsea. I'm not saying they're going to compete with Chelsea, and actually Todd Bowley has made more bad business decisions than good, but he wants to be at that table. I was expecting a busy summer for Bournemouth anyway. I'm expecting an even busier summer now, and obviously the fact that the new man knows the Spanish league so well, you would imagine there's 1 or 2 players that will come in from La Liga. I think what's also important is that in the statement where Bournemouth announced the change of manager, they didn't mention any backroom staff that will be coming in. I think they're going to keep the core of the backroom staff that worked under Gary O'Neill, the likes of Tommy Elphick, former club captain, the man who skippered Bournemouth to promotion to the Premier League for the first time in their history. And I think that's really important, because you can evolve as a football club, but I think Bournemouth are a very special football club. Anybody who knows the story, Eddie Howe was there. They were on the verge of relegation to non-league. They worked all the way up from League Two to the Premier League. They've gone down again. They've come back up again. You need to keep people like Tommy Elphick as part of the fabric of that football club. Otherwise, I think they'd really be struggling.